Alright, what's up gamers? I got myself some Nilla wafers, because I've been procrastinating on making this video all day, and so hitting the record button, that means it's a Nilla wafer time. Welcome back everyone, my name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and we're going to be going over the last event that I went to, which was the Palm Springs Open, hosted in Palm Springs, the Margaritaville Resort. Now, if you guys heard anything about it, yes, the power went out for a little while at the hotel and they lost AC, but I was in an Airbnb, so I didn't have to worry about that. It was a good time. This was a 6-round GT hosted over 2 days with 170 entrants. So I want to give a big shout out to Nick and the Diceheimer team for putting on this event. I've gone to several Diceheimer events so far, including CTC and Palm Springs Open for the first time, so really got to say they do a really good job at putting everything together and making sure everything runs mostly on time. Jumping over to the player pack, there was something a little bit interesting about this GT because not every table is played on the same terrain. In fact, you can kind of see there are 3 different styles of terrain that you could play on. There are 40 tables of Games Workshop style terrain, and we played on Pariah Nexus 1 and Pariah Nexus 2, I think they were. 33 tables of Dicehammer terrain, which is some of the custom stuff run by the TO that looks a lot like Pariah Nexus 1. And then 20 tables of WTC terrain, some of the medium terrain density. Now, you guys are all familiar with what Pariah Nexus 1 looks like, probably, and Pariah Nexus 2. However, this is what the Dicehammer terrain setup looked like. As you can see, it looks pretty similar to Pariah Nexus 1, but not quite the same. In particular, the area. And then in here, you could not stand on the middle objective from inside these walls. You had to come out into the open. Also, a lot of the objectives ended up being fairly open in the southeast and northwest parts of the board. This is what some of the Pariah Nexus terrain looked like. And then there was WTC terrain. Now, this changed for a lot of different missions. I didn't play on any of it, but it was possible that you would end up playing on these. And so it did change some of the list building plans that I had going into it. But I didn't play on any of these, so I can't really comment on them. In fact, I've never played on WTC terrain. Alright, finished talking about the player pack. So going over the list that I ended up bringing to this one. So going over the list that I brought to this event, we have a Cadian command squad, Gaunt's Ghosts, Lord Solar, a Militarum Tempestus command squad with as many special weapons as you can pack in there, 1 unit of Cadians, 1 unit of Catachan, a single Chimera, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn with the 4-up invuls, a single Hellhound, a single Exterminator, and then 2 Rogal Dorns, 1 Scout Sentinel, 1 unit of 10 Tempestus Scions, and 1 unit of 5 Tempestus Scions. The biggest thing here was the Cadian Command Squad was something that I had never really played before. I brought it to... Actually, no, I upgraded it from a platoon command squad at an RTT with the expectation that it would allow Lord Solar and the Cadians who had sticky the home objective to leave the home objective relatively early on. Overall, this was really built around the 2 Rogal Dorns, which have been a staple in a lot of competitive guard lists these days. And so that's why I brought an Exterminator and a Hellhound in order to try and make up for their relatively low AP on the main gun. The other major thing is that unit of Tempestus Scions with the Tempestus Scion command squad does a lot of damage on the turn that it drops in. We'll talk about any changes I would make to this list at the end. Talked about the list. My first opponent of the day, I ended up playing up against Jay Jones and his Aeldari, and basically the big things to know about this is he built it around, 1, the avatar of Cain, with the Farseer Skyrunner running around to give him the flip things to 6s, and then they had a unit of a bunch of Wind Riders with the Shuriken Cannons, and these guys can do the fire and fade, and they just do a ton of damage every single time. And then after that, it was mostly just a bunch of MSU things in order to score some points. However, a couple of interesting things he also had in his list was he had Giant Zar, which I believe is the Howling Banshee Phoenix Lord, and then Karandras, which was the Striking Scorpion Phoenix Lord. This game, we ended up playing on the Dicehammer terrain. I'm going to try and keep this relatively snappy. I say that every time, but I'm only really going to talk about 2 major parts of this game. So the first one was either on the first turn or second turn, where Jay had a unit of, I believe it was the Howling Banshees and Striking Scorpions that were here. And then I had a couple of tanks right here, like right in this area. And when it came time to Phantasm, he took one of these units and Phantasmed it over this way. The problem for that was that I also had another Rogal Dorn over here, and that gave it clear line of sight to shoot at it. At the, I think it was the Howling Banshees, and so Giant Zara was just out in the open. I killed all of her a little bodyguard unit, and that hurt a lot because it ended up being a wasted CP expenditure as well as just losing the unit anyway. A lot of the rest of the game, we end up seeing Jay have his Wind Riders somewhere, like in this area, moving back and forth and just pew-pewing things down these corridors. But there was one point at which Jay brought his Avatar, and it was sitting right around here. And I still had a bunch of tanks in this area. It was at least the Exterminator and the Rogal Dorn, and then they opened fire. I shot at it with a Hellhound, I think from like here, and the Hellhound stripped the cover. I spent 2 CP on Fields of Fire, then the Exterminator shot, then the Rogal Dorn shot, and the Exterminator, it shot 8 shots with its main gun, and it wounded on 6 of them. And normally those are AP 1 shots, but because Fields of Fire and stripping cover meant that it was AP2 ignoring cover. So suddenly, every single shot that was coming out from this Exterminator was putting the Avatar in its invul. And even though it's a 4-up invul, with having damage, 3 autocannon shots ended up going through, and just the Exterminator alone did at least 6 damage to the Avatar of Cain by itself, with just the main gun. And I think it did a little bit more with the Multi-Meltas and Las Cannon, and maybe Stubber as well. But I remember talking to Jay at the end of the game, and he said, yeah, I didn't think the Avatar was going to die like that. And I was like, I didn't think the Exterminator was going to do that much damage. And we just killed the Avatar. Now, the really interesting thing about this is right before the Avatar actually shot at my Rogal Dorn, and it popped off, right? He turned the attack to a 6, so he got sustained D3. He rolled all the shots. He wounded, I think, all of them. And anyway, I rolled my saves, failed them, and he did like 16 damage over like the first 2 shots. And then I was like, well, I have this last save. I could blanket with a Blade of Plating, but I don't want to use it because I want to make sure that your Avatar is still here out in the open where I can pull line of sight. Because if I hadn't, the Avatar might have actually gotten behind this wall where I could have no longer seen it, and I really didn't want that to happen. So it's the first time I've ever intentionally not used a Blade of Plating to get a Rogal Dorn killed intentionally. So that ended up working out in my favor. This game ended up being kind of a blowout for me. I ended up winning this one 92-47. Jay went on to do very well, so I think he was just kind of warming up, got surprised with some of my damage, and also he put his first like ritual marker here, and then he forgot to put his second one. So, ended up screwing himself out on a lot of primary and just kind of ran out of things towards the end of the game. But good opponent, was a lot of fun. My second game, I played up against Wyatt Swift Ramirez and his Drukhari, and this guy brought a Tantalus, and this Tantalus was really interesting. We ended up playing this one on Linchpin on Tipping Point. He brought 2 Ninja Scourges, Reavers, Mandrakes, Incubi, a lot of like just little things, a bunch of Venoms, Cabalites, more Cabalites, and a Beastmaster. And one of the really important things is because we played it on this terrain yet again, was that we were playing it on, what's it called? Fog of War, which meant no core stratagems in the first battle round. Now, I didn't play around this very much. However, Wyatt knew how to take advantage of it, because he took his Beastmaster, which started here, it scouted, and then it moved, and then because I had a bunch of tanks, like, right in here, he actually was able to get the Beastmaster into a turn 1 charge into multiple vehicles. And I was like, oh, that's totally fine. I'm going to Overwatch them. Forgetting that Fog of War meant no core stratagems on turn 1. So the Beastmaster was able to get in, do a lot of damage, and my Hellhound and my Rogal Dorn, which I was relying on to like Overwatch against these targets, couldn't do that. So that ended up hurting me quite a bit. However, this game was still super wild. One of the next thing that I remember happening was he had his Tantalus parked somewhere in here, and he used a reactive move in order to move it back around here. And this was on my second turn. And I remember saying to Wyatt, ooh, it's PSO, it might be time to make it happen, because there is a region here where I could drop all of my Scions such that they would be within 12 inches with their Melta-Guns shooting at this. Additionally, I had an Exterminator that could have pulled this angle if I needed to. And I spent probably 5 to 10 minutes deliberating whether or not this drop was a good idea. I ultimately decided that it was the kind of thing that I needed more math on it. I didn't know if I was supposed to kill it. But the big thing that I ended up telling Wyatt is, don't worry, I'm not going to do it now, but I will come back to you tomorrow after I've like checked it out on unitcrunch.com and let you know if it was a good idea or not. And it was. I was supposed to devote, a little bit like the main gun of the Rogal Dorn, which was like here, the Exterminator, and the Scions. And if all of this goes into the Tantalus, even with his 4-up invul save that he can give to it, it's supposed to die. So I ended up missing out. I said, it's PSO. Ah, it's not PSO. We're not going to go for it. Anyway, so that was one of the big moments where the game could have swung. Another moment that the game that was really interesting was I dropped Scions down here, I believe it was a turn later, and he had the Court of the Archon here, and they overwatched. And they killed the Tempestus Scions unit, like the 10-man that dropped in, but he didn't fully kill the officer squad. And so I spent reinforcements, 2 CP on reinforcements, and after they died, they just dropped here again anyway. But it ended up stopping a lot of the damage because they no longer had sustain. So I didn't just wipe the Archon core right then and there, but it did a lot of damage to it. So that was another interesting moment. That didn't really change a lot. There was one big interesting moment because I had my home objective here, and I had forgotten that Wyatt just had like a lone Mandrake back here. And at one point, I think it was on turn 4, he picks up the Mandrake and drops it on my home objective, which had been stickied by the Cadians. And this was yet again another major moment because in the rules it says if you reposition units, when they come in at the end of the phase that they come in, they have to take a battle shock test if they would have had to take one if they were on the table. And because it's no longer during the battle shock step of your command phase, you can't use insane bravery on it. And you also can't CP reroll it just because CP reroll doesn't allow you to reroll battle shock tests. And he came in, and this would have denied my primary. He would have been able to get containment, and he would have probably, or at least threatened to take it. So this would have been at least an 8-point swing. But he fails the battle shock test. So that ends up not going through. The last major time in this game, so this was on turn 4, I had taken Lord Solar's unit and moved it somewhere in here. I had a unit of horses about like this. I think it was a Rogal Dorn right here. Maybe it was an Exterminator. It was a tank of some kind. And he had a unit of Incubi and the Archon here. And what he was able to do is there is just enough space for him to fit models between these two units. And what that ended up meaning was that he needed to roll a 7-inch charge in order to get into Lord Solar. He ended up rolling a 12. And that was a massive difference in terms of output because this was my last Battleline unit. And I was trying to get it out here because we had the tipping point deployment zone. If my Cadians get out of the deployment zone and he gets battle line into my deployment zone, his secret mission goes off. And so he killed my last battle line unit. And then on turn 5, right as the clock was running out, he had a unit of witches, and they were able to make it their way into my deployment zone. And ultimately, like with so many like major spots on the board where everything changed, I ended up losing this one really close. It was 75 to 79. So really close game to Wyatt. Like I said, I was supposed to shoot all my Scions here. Never did it. It ends up being one of the many things that this game had hinged on. So I'm really looking forward to an opportunity to play against him again and hopefully pull out the win next time. Okay, next. My round 3, my last game of day 1, was played up against Gabriel Palacios and his Vanguard Onslaught Tyranids. I don't know what a typical Vanguard list looks like, but he brought Winged Tyranid Prime with the warrior things. Yeah, these guys, the melee weapons. He had the Winged Hive Tyrant. He had the Neuro Tyrant attached to a bunch of Zone Thropes. Death Leaper, Broodlord Gene Stealers, 2 units of Gargoyles, Biovore, bunch of Gene Stealers, Lictors, and Double Moloch. We ended up playing this one yet again. This was my 3rd straight game that I ended up playing on this terrain. And this one was Supply Drop on Hammer and Anvil and Smoke and Mirrors, the one where you can take something and put it in reserve. Honestly, this game was kind of boring. This is not like to take away anything from Gabriel, but because Gabriel ended up going first, he had to be the one to put pressure on me. The major point was that he had to prevent me from scoring the final objective on this game because, going second on supply drop kind of just means that you have a 15-point swing that you can kind of count on the last turn of the game. So what ended up happening in this one was Gabe had a bunch of melee units here, a bunch of melee units here. He would stick like a Lictor on this objective, and then anything that came here would die. And then I had my objective here that I had a Chimera just towing onto. I parked, 2 tanks here. I parked a tank here. I had a bunch of horses here, and we just kind of looked at each other for 3 turns. And Gabriel drew really badly on his secondaries. He did not score a secondary point until turn 5, where he rolled Secure No Man's Land. And then he did not score another secondary point until, or turn 3, he scored Secure No Man's Land. And then turn 5, he scored Cleanse for 1 objective. Meanwhile, I was doing pretty decently. I kind of forgot that Storm Hostile, you can keep it, but you can't score it turn 1, even if you have it. Thank you, Pariah Nexus. But I was just scoring pretty irregularly. I was able to put, like, Bullgryn here on the point, and then they would just, and I had, like, another unit of Bullgryn here that could Heroic Intervention anything that charged. So, I scored a 10. I scored... Oh, wait, it's not that the objectives were there. The objectives were... I'll draw them here. It's Hammer and Anvil. So these were the objectives. I was able to park Bullgryn here and here, and then just threaten to get him off of this every single time. So he just, waited for his moment, waited for a moment, and the moment just never came. So this one ended up being a pretty... The score was, like, kind of close, but it's a score that I was just not taking any risks for. So I ended up winning this game 79-45. So that's day 1. Feeling okay about myself at this. I end up going 2-1 on the first day, which means that I am no longer in the running for the golden ticket or winning the event, but I can still do what I can to go 5-1 and find myself on my own spreadsheet. So I went over to one of my buddies' places at the resort, and they were making Gonsters and all kinds of other drinks, which is Guinness and Nitrous Monster energy drink. Some people liked it. It was not for me, but it didn't need to be. Because after that, we were getting ready for day 2. On day 2, come back and find out I'm playing against a guy that I played against before, that I played against at the May the 4th GT, which was the last big event that I went to. Jeff Lieblow, really good guy, plays Thousand Suns. He had a pretty normal-looking Thousand Suns list from what I could tell. He had Triple Infernal Master, Ahriman, Exalted Sorcerer on Disc, Magnus, bunch of Rubric Marines, unit of Zangors, 2 Mutal Vortex Beasts, 2 units of Spawn, and 1 unit of Cultist. This game, we ended up playing on Take and Hold with Hidden Supplies and... What's the special rule? Oh, Hidden Supplies is the special rule. And we ended up playing it on Search and Destroy. So in this mission, we had our objectives something like this, where these 2 middle ones, you couldn't... I don't think you were able to stand in them while being behind the wall, if I remember correctly. But this game, I think Jeff made a pretty big mistake on turn 1. I had a bunch of tanks kind of in a parking lot in here, and then I had my other Rogal Dorn here. And Jeff took Magnus, who deployed here, and he moved out so he could barely see my Chimera, which was full of Catachan. He used Magnus, and he killed the Chimera. And I'm like, okay, cool. However, this left me with the Exterminator, the Hellhound, and 1 Rogal Dorn, which could all pull line of sight directly back at Magnus. And I went for it. I put all their fire. I spent 2 CP on Fields of Fire. I put everything I could into Magnus and dropped him down to, I think it was 6 wounds. And that was after he had to burn CP and use multiple reroll saves in order to make sure that Magnus stayed alive. Because I got through a Las Cannon, I got through a Hunter Killer, and that just meant that a lot of damage was going into Magnus all of a sudden. And at the same time, the other Rogal Dorn popped out and did some damage to, I don't remember, other things. I charged some horses from here into a Mutalith Vortex Beast that was here, and this one lived on 2 wounds, but he didn't have a whole lot of damage that he had left to do. I had also charged some Bullgryn into Mutalith Vortex Beast that was here, and then he just kind of ran out of steam, because he knew that if Magnus showed himself again, he was going to die. Like, Magnus could not do any real damage again. Like, he could pop probably the Hellhound, maybe the Exterminator, and then his Rubric Marines and the rest of his units were just not mobile enough to really do any threatening damage to me over the course of the game. Because on the next turn, Magnus fired back. He didn't want to get Overwatch, so he killed the Hellhound. Mutalith Beasts were a little bit annoying. A bunch of Rubric Marines came out here and flamed all the horses that were there. But then after that, my Rogal Dorns were never going to die to anything else. Like, they just popped out, they just moved around. I had room to drop Scions here, so they contributed to killing Magnus. They contributed to killing, like, a little character here, and then they did some damage to the unit that was on this objective. Or I guess it was here, but you know, I did some shooting against those guys. And we just kind of talked out the game from there, because Jeff had just lost too much. He almost lost Magnus on turn 1, he did lose Magnus on turn 2, and then I was just able to kind of clean things up, because nothing was threatening the Rogal Dorns for the rest of the game. So this one ended up being a 98 to 65 in my favor. But it was a good game. It was an interesting moment, and I think Jeff learned that he can't challenge that many tanks with Magnus, especially because the Exterminator tank was once again popping off. So we improved to 3-1 on day 2, and then we go into another game of Vanguard Onslaught. So this time I was playing up against Brett and his Vanguard Onslaught Tyranids. And he brought a list that looked pretty similar for the most part. Had 2 Broodlords, Death Leaper, Neurotyrant, Winged Hive Tyrant, Winged Tyranid Prime, just 1 unit of Gargoyles, 1 unit of Gaunts, the same Biovore. He only had 2 small units of Genestealers that both had Broodlords with them, whereas Gabe had a 5, a 5, and a 10, and only 1 Broodlord. Lictors, Moloch, Neurolictor, Raveners, 2 units of them. These are the ones that go up and down. And then Tyranid Warriors, Zoanthropes, and a Trigon. And this time, once again, we were playing on the Dice Hammer terrain. And our mission this time was Purge the Foe on Tipping Point with Smoke and Mirrors. Once again, the one that you can take things and deploy them into Strategic Reserve. We had our objectives on this one. This was really tough for Brett because we had one objective that was mostly in the open here, one objective that was entirely in the open here, and one objective that was mostly in the open here. Like I accidentally said about the other game, you could put like one little guy here, one little guy here, and they would not be seen, but you could not put anything on the center objective without it being in the open, because you could not do it on the other side of this wall. You had to be in the middle corridor. So the game was actually very similar as the one that I played going into Gabriel earlier that I now against Brett. I once again went second, and that is such a big difference on Purge the Foe, because I always know how many units it is that I need to kill in order to score kill more. It also means that I'm going to score a 16 on the bottom of turn 5, just because I'm going to go stand on all the objectives. I'm going to control 1 and control more, and I'm very likely to kill more at the end because I can move to kill things in the same way that I can do everything else. This game, I just took no risks. We went back and forth, scoring secondary points. He actually outscored me on secondary. However, there's only one really interesting part of this game, and this is when Brett sees his one opportunity to try and jump back in, and he has a Winged Hive Tyrant here. I had made a mistake of dropping my small Scions somewhere in here in order to score Recover Assets in No Man's Land, because we were on Tipping Point, which is like this one, right? Anyway, I was definitely supposed to drop them here, where they would have been very safe. However, Brett sees one moment where he's like, I have the access to advance and charge. I'm going to take my Hive Tyrant, it's going to advance, and it is going to try and charge these guys. But I had my big Union Scions here. And then when he goes for this, I say, well, Brett, I'm going to Overwatch that. I kind of have to if I want to try and score Recover Assets. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. I go ahead and roll, and I go, all right, Brett, I'm going to overcharge everything. Because you neither started nor ended on an objective, I am going to be hitting on 6s and only re-rolling 1s. Let me shoot my Meltas first. And I roll 1 6, a second 6, and a third 6. And each of these is sustained. So that means on 3 Melta shots, I hit 6 times. And because as he comes out, this is within 9 inches, they're all doing Melta too. So he rolls his saves. I think I end up winning with 4 of them. And he rolls his saves, fails 2. I roll a 4 for damage and a 1 for damage. I CP reroll this one into a 5. So this is 6 plus 7. And I believe a Hive Tyrant only has 12 wounds. So it just dies. And that's the only moment in the game where I think Brett really had any chance of trying to stop me from just winning the game. The end score ended up being kind of close, but it's because I knew I didn't need to score all of the points. I just need to score some points. And as long as I'm scoring some points every single turn, I'm going to win this game. So I end up winning this one 84 to 71. It was an interesting game. I do think that the combination of the mission plus the terrain plus the matchup made it very difficult for my opponent, especially since I went second. I think if any one or two of these things is different, the game could have been close, but I was never pressured to do anything the entire game, which is awesome for Guard. We love not having to do anything. So now I am 4-1, and that means that I can start setting up for the last game of the tournament. In the last game, I play up against Timothy Travers and his Chaos Demons, and he brought an interesting build because I had not seen this before. He brought Rodigus, a Demon Prince of Chaos, Corn 1, two great Unclean ones, one of them with the 4+ Feel No Pain, a Lord of Change, a Spoilpox, oh, that's a Plague Bear thing, some Nurglings, some Plague Bears, more Plague Bears, a unit of 6 Flamers, some Plague Drones, and 2 Beasts of Nurgle. Now, the biggest thing for me were, one, I didn't think Beasts of Nurgle were as tanky as they were. I did not realize how many wounds that they had and that they were toughness 9. I thought they were like toughness 7 or 8. So that was really, really durable. They don't do a lot of damage, but you don't need to do a lot of damage if you just don't die. And you have to devote like real damage into them or they're just going to slowly chip away at things. Yet again, ladies and gentlemen, we played on the Dice Hammer terrain. And this one was on Scorched Earth with Inspired Leadership and Crucible of Battle. So we had our objectives something like this, right? This game, I did my best to just kind of screen out as much of this side of the board as possible. However, I made a crucial mistake early on in the game. We had my home objective like here, and I had strung out my Cadians something to cover this, okay? And then I had my Rogal Dorn chilling here. And I had asked Tim what the smallest footprint for any of his demons are. And he was like, well, the Beast of Nurgle is about this big. And I'm like, okay, so about 2 inches wide. All right, cool. My Cadians are like 4.5 inches from this wall. You can't come in with that. However, Tim took 3 Great Unclean ones, Rodigus, a fantastic Bill and Ted is what he called it, 1 Great Unclean one, and then another Great Unclean one. And they just all dropped here. And then he dropped his like little plague drone guys on bugs things, and they also dropped here. And these guys charged in. The other thing that he did is he was able to fit a unit of 6 Flamers here. And this was bad news, because the Flamers obliterated the Cadian squad. The Rodigus and the Great Unclean ones, when they came in, I actually rolled sick nasty on my invul saves on the Bullgryn, so the Bullgryn just lived. However, I now had a problem. There are 3 Great Unclean ones here that I have to deal with, and I just have an Exterminator, a Hellhound, and a Rogal Dorn in some arrangement over here. Oh no, the Hellhound was actually over here. So I had a Chimera, this was the Exterminator, and this was the Rogal Dorn. And they needed to kill 3 Great Unclean ones. However, I also needed to kill this, because if this comes back as another opportunity to do what it just did to my Cadians, I'm going to lose this game. So I open fire, and I kill Rodigus. However, my unit of horses that charges in does like 2 wounds to the Bill and Ted conversion. And then he just never leaves this objective. I don't think I score this objective a single time. He's controlling this one with Plague Bears. He's able to put the Lord of Change, and also this Great Unclean one moves over this way. And I'm just cooked. Like, I tried to shoot my way out of Demon Jail, and I simply can't. Yeah, that's more or less it. I feel like I got stat checked, which is not at all a criticism of Tim. Like, he saw his opportunity for a stat check, and he went for it, and it was successful. I was constantly in a battle of trying to untangle all of my vehicles in this area, because it's such a small area trying to move around. And every single time he would like, well, I'm going to charge it with a Great Unclean one, or I'm going to charge it with these, bug flyers, or I'm going to charge things with Plague Bears. And it's like, well, I can't move, because I need to shoot into that, but I do need to move in order to try and deal with the pressure that he's putting on. And ultimately, we ended up calling this one, I think, during turn 3 because I was just like, yeah, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to try and do a secret mission with the Battleline ones because I had some. When the Cadians died, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to put the Cadians in. I'm going to try and use the War of Attrition one and bring them back over here later on. Didn't end up working out because he had his Plague Bearers like land here and charge Lord Solar and take control of my home objective. So I was barely scoring primary for the rest of the game. But overall, I mean, really good stuff to Tim. His great and clean one, all in, just put me in a position where I couldn't really do anything. So that was a really good play coming out from Tim. Congrats to him. He ends up winning this one 46-79, and he ends up ending the event 5-1. I end up ending the event 4-2. So then let's go back and talk about the list a little bit and talk about things that I would probably change if I were to go to this event again. The first thing, I think I got a little bit unlucky with my Cadian command squad because I played against double Vanguard Onslaught Tyranids, Drukhari, Daemons, Aeldari with Swooping Hawks, and Thousand Suns who had the teleport enhancement. So every single game, my Cadians could never leave the backfield because I always needed to screen it out. I could never let him have my home objective uncontested. So I always needed guys there. So if I got to play against the same opponents, I wish this was a platoon command squad with Catachan because they're a little bit cheaper, and it would have saved me 10 points. The other major change that I wish I had made is that the Catachan Chimera, I think this is a really good combination of units. However, I think it's a really poor one of, right? If you only have one unit of Catachan Chimeras, it's pretty easy to just kill it. And then these guys, yeah, they'll spill out and they'll be 20 OC, but cool. Like, it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't change their ability to do a whole lot. And I definitely feel like if I was going to run Catachan Chimera again, I would want to run more of them. However, there's nothing else in this list that I would want to cut. So, what I would do instead is I would probably drop this single Catachan Chimera and look to add maybe a Hellhound, maybe another unit of Rough Riders, or maybe look to take this one unit of 5 Tempestus Scions and turn it into a second big unit of Tempestus Scions with the Militarum Tempestus Command Squad. And I think those are the only real changes I would look to make to this list if I were to play this list again. Rogal Dorns, big fan. They did a lot of damage. The Exterminator, I'm sold on it. It's not just a support piece anymore. It is a legitimate damage piece, especially now that it has lethal hits because of the number of shots that it puts out. The Hellhound, big fan of this. It is so hard to kill. The Bullgryn, once again, all-stars. Every single part of this, it felt like was doing everything it needed to, except for the Cadian Command Squad, or the Cadians, and the Catachan Chimera. If you're trying to do secret missions, you really only need the one unit of Catachan attached to Lord Solar. Let's talk briefly about future plans. I have an RTT coming up. I probably won't make a video about it. I'll probably just do another post like I did with the last one. And then I have the Hammer of Wrath GT coming up on August 24th, which I will be making a video about. I'm also signed up for a Teams event, I believe in October, and I'm hoping to find at least one more GT between now and then that I can participate in. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I breezed through this thing. Congratulations to our top 3 at the event as well. Jason McKenzie bringing his Tau in 3rd, Grant Kaufman and his Death Guard in 2nd, and Wyatt Harris with his Drukhari coming in from Arizona to take the whole thing. I believe Wyatt and Grant have earned themselves golden tickets to go to the World Championships of Warhammer, so congratulations to them for that. My name has been Joshua Joshi Howard. This has been our Tournament After Action Report for Palm Springs, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.